What's up, guys? Coming at you from Shenzhen. A quick update on the coronavirus, the whole situation here, what the government's doing, what the conversation's looking like, and what the atmosphere is like in terms of how people are feeling and what they're talking about. And what I'm going to do is I had to go out to pick something up really quickly, and I'm going to show you the roads here because I think this is going to be pretty interesting. Shenzhen typically during this time has a really eerie, empty feel to it because everybody's kind of gone home for Chinese New Year, and Shenzhen is a migrant city. So that's obviously now going to be compounded by the fact that not many people are going out and a few other things which I'll mention in the video. But what I want to do first is I want to switch the camera over to the other side and let's take a little tour of some of these really empty streets and have a quick chat. With that said, let's go. All right, so what we've got going on here in Shenzhen is that last night a lot of the bars had police show up and basically tell them that they had to shut down until further notice. Restaurants are still allowed to stay open, so you've got a couple of kind of bars, so to speak. They're in a gray zone, a gray area where they are bars, but on their business license it says that they are a restaurant, so that they get to stay open. But all the nightclubs and the big bars, the ones that you're really going to see large gatherings of people, are pretty much closed. As a lot of you guys know, I have bars here. Two of my locations, they're licensed and registered as bars. And then our main location is a restaurant designation. So technically we can open up, but I think I am not going to do that. I'm not going to call my staff back yet. I think it's better for us to kind of stay on the cautious side. And actually the government's even said if any of our staff are coming back from Hubei, or even if they have to pass through Hubei on their journey back to Shenzhen, not to call them to come back to Shenzhen. So they've got all kinds of recommendations and things like that in place. And it's not surprising to hear Shenzhen do something like that. Shenzhen is really quite on top of the ball with this kind of stuff. And I'd actually even say even overreacts in many cases. And I'll give you an example of that. Shenzhen's applying for something right now called a cultured city license. So they'll be designated as one of the cultural cities, or I don't know the exact word that they use of Shenzhen, but onto the point. Basically what they did was, for example, there's a park just behind these buildings up here that we're going to get up to called Shenzhen Talent Park. And, this guy just wants to pop right in front of me here. You see that? So what they did is basically they said, okay, there are no picnic mats. You can't put mats out and have picnics in the park. And it's like, what? Really? To be a cultured city, this is what's happening? This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to enjoy the parks. And it was kind of annoying, but, that's kind of characteristic of Shenzhen. So they're really on top of things. And our kids' school has been delayed by 13 days. They're going to get extra 13 days holiday. Well, I call it holiday, but the teachers are going to post their work online and tell us what they need to do, and they can do their work from home. And so, yeah, we've got the bars closed, the school's closed. We've got recommendations on not to bring staff back if they're coming from certain places. And then in terms of the other areas, so Wuhan is obviously on somewhat of a lockdown, a city of, 11 million people. And the other thing is that I heard just before I left my apartment here was that they've actually put Beijing on lockdown, which would be even more remarkable. I mean, that's a city of 20 million people. And what's interesting is the general conversation in groups. I'm in a few groups with a bunch of lawyers, actually, who studied overseas in the US and the UK, and it's been interesting to listen to how they're talking about this, because they usually get quite annoyed at when, overseas countries are kind of virtue signaling China without actually putting things into perspective. But in this case, they know what people are saying overseas, but they're not really concerned about it. They're not really focusing on it. They're just really focusing on what needs to be done here. And the interesting thing when I talked to a couple of them that they said was that, they're really disappointed in Wuhan. They're really disappointed in the communication, and I alluded to that in my last video in terms of Wuhan had a lot of small things and big things that they did really wrong, that they could have done a lot better. And that's overwhelmingly the conversation here now in China. Just before I left, I saw a viral video that's going around of I can't remember if it was a doctor or something, but he's talking about all the failures of Wuhan and more or less like cover-up in the beginning. And so the lawyers that I know, they're really upset about that. But at the same time, they say that, okay, you know what? So the first 10 days or 20 days, there was this cover-up, there was this issue, there were these things that we need to be angry about. But what happened in the next following 10 to 20 days, when you add that all up and say, okay, now we're a total of 20 or 40 days later, whatever, we're still way better off than any other country would have handled it at this point. It doesn't excuse what Wuhan did. It doesn't make them happy about it. It doesn't give them comfort. They're still upset about it. But they're like, you know what, these guys who are talking about us, there's no way they would have had these kinds of tools at their disposal to just shut down a city, or to, what's remarkable is they're building a new hospital in Wuhan from scratch. It's basically a bare piece of land, and they said it's going to be finished in 2 weeks. I mean, that's unfathomable. I can't even imagine it. To be honest, I don't even really fully believe it, but there's a video of it online, and there's a pretty big construction crew there. I'll see if I can fit it into this video. But this is the kind of scale of things that isn't really possible anywhere else. So overall, we're still better off than anywhere else, even when you take into consideration and you factor in those major missteps. But they're like, you know what, it doesn't matter. That fact doesn't matter. That shouldn't stop us from hoping for more and wanting more. You know, at the end of the day, we all know that the fact that we're going to have a global pandemic one day is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And in all likelihood, it is going to come from a place with a large concentrated population. So in this case, we're all hoping that this is not that time. This is not that one. Coronavirus isn't that big one that we've all been waiting for, but we should treat it as it is. And while that almost creates a certain level of panic also, because now people are like, whoa, we're shutting down schools, we're shutting down cities. Is this something I should be really worried about? And that's not necessarily a bad thing to put people on alert. But the benefit of this, even if it does turn out to not be that big one we were waiting for, is it's created a system, it's created a case study for China to really say, okay, when the big one really does happen, when it really is the serious one, this is what we've learned from the last time around. And this is where we need to do better. And these are the things that aren't working well. These are the parts of our framework that we need to change. So when and if we kind of get clear of this situation that's going on now, there's going to be a lot of value from what's happened here during this period of time. And so that's obviously that's looking on the bright side of things. We all should hope that that's how it's going to play out. But that's kind of the feel on the ground of the conversation here. And for me personally, in my last video, I focused a little bit more on that overseas narrative and how kind of a little bit condescending and unself-aware a lot of the narrative is. I mean, a lot of the information these people are getting, it's public information in China also, and they're kind of getting it at the same time as the people here. But it's almost like people overseas are talking about it in a way where it's like they're more in the know than the people are here. And if they really want to kind of do that, and that's fine. I mean, everybody should be kind of sharing ideas about this and talking about it. Granted, the way that the conversation is going is a little bit more selfish. It's got a little bit more of an agenda to it, and it feeds into this existing apparatus that has been kind of going on for the last year, which is, you know, this anti-China fear-mongering kind of a situation. So it's a perfect opportunity for people to feed this into. But what I'd like to see is these kind of people who feel like they're in a position to say, oh, wow, bad China, they didn't do a good job here. And they're right in many cases. I mean, even the Chinese people here have acknowledged that also. But how about you come up with an idea? How about you come up with a better idea? How about you say, okay, well, if something like this happened in another country, and we've got examples of different diseases spreading, or for example, the epidemic in the US right now, or whatever you want to call it, the flu season, it's shaping up to be one of the worst in 10 years, with 6,000 plus people who have died already. I've heard the latest number is actually like 8,000. The question is, okay, so the US is being faced with this virus also, and people from the US are saying China's not really doing a good job here. And granted, the strain of flu that is going around in the US isn't something to be as concerned about in terms of looking at the structure of this virus here and what it is. Which, by the way, is quite remarkable that the kind of authorities here have kind of DNA sequenced it within such a short period of time, and even identified the exact market that this virus has come from. I think we've got to keep in mind how remarkable that is also. But back onto my main point. So when we're looking at the largest flu season with the largest kind of death toll in the past decade in countries like the US or elsewhere, well, what is it they did? What kinds of things did they put in place to try to mitigate the risk of it spreading even more? And if your answer is nothing, that is really something to consider when you're taking this kind of a really self-righteous kind of approach. And hey, you know what? If you don't want to be self-aware about it, then that's fine. Don't be self-aware about it. But just to let you know, a lot of people here see it for what it is. And they're not really interested in engaging with it right now, because obviously they've got more important things to worry about. And they know that the narrative isn't coming from a place of concern. And they know that there isn't anything constructive being added from these people. And it really is just kind of agenda driven. So they're like, whatever, we don't have time for this right now. And good on them. I mean, you know what? The focus should be here, and we should be figuring out what we can do here, really. So what else is there? You know what? I'll probably leave it at that for now. And I might do another update as things are kind of progressing. And hopefully we've got better news. But, you know, fingers crossed. And if you had any specific questions or things that you wanted me to cover while I'm here, just let me know in the comments. And if I do a third follow-up, I will definitely see if I can get to it. So anyways, guys, stay safe, especially if you're here in China or anywhere really for that matter. Taking all of the necessary precautions, keeping your hands clean, all that kind of stuff, all that kind of good stuff. And yeah, stay safe, guys. I'll see you next time.